This video is going to be a look at personnel groupings and the associated formations that the Ravens are using in 2021. It's really a part of a larger study that I'm attempting to do on the Ravens' use of formations and personnel groupings. I would love to have that done by the end of the regular season. I'm going to be honest with you, it's going to be difficult to do so. Consider this a primer or a preview on the Ravens' personnel groupings and formations. So this first one I'm going to talk about, as you see in the bottom, is 21 personnel. And you probably have a question in your mind right now, like, hold on, I only see one back in the backfield. You're right. This is the tailback, which I believe is Latavius Murray. I'm treating Ricard or classifying Ricard as a fullback in most of our formations. There will be one formation where I classify him as a tight end. So that's the 2 and 21 personnel. Here's the tight end, which is typically called the Y, which I think is Mark Andrews. I will let the plays run. I'm not necessarily concerned about the effectiveness of the plays or the schemes. Only from the standpoint of, are we predictable out of these certain formations and certain personnel groupings? So you can see as a big play to Marquise Brown from early in the season. I felt like we used this twin wing formation more earlier in the year than we have lately. One thing to mention from the end zone angle is typically when we have the two tight ends over here to the right, or one tight end and one fullback in this case, we're very personnel oriented. So when Mark Andrews is here, he'll typically release in a route. And when Ricard is here as the outside guy, he'll typically stay in to block on the edge. If we had Cologne here or Tomlinson with Ricard, generally they would both stay in to block on the defensive end so that the offensive line could work on the other 3 or 4 rushers in whatever defensive alignment they're seeing. So we are somewhat predictable in terms of our protection scheme there. We're also predictable in terms of run pass. This is a pass formation for us. I've been waiting for us to unveil some run plays. We do use the RPO out of the twin wing set occasionally. Earlier in the season against the Broncos, again, Ricard, the fullback, is lined up as a wing. I think this is Latavius Murray as the tailback, and I believe this is Tomlinson, the tight end. So just to illustrate my point about us being somewhat predictable, when we have certain guys over here, they're going to stay in a max protect, and this is going to end up being a 2 or maybe a 3 receiver route once the back leaks out in the backfield. And I'm not necessarily concerned about the effectiveness of the plays. Most of these are plays that I've covered already anyway. If the back was set to this side in your typical shotgun alignment, what some people call sidecar, he would be crossing Lamar's face, and it would be an RPO where Lamar would read the inside linebacker to the side of the back to see what he does, if he goes with the running back or if he just sits, in terms of whether or not to throw the ball to Marquise Brown. We have yet to run the ball to the tight end wing side yet out of this formation. Actually, I think we did it one time, and I'll show that play a little bit later in this video. Another 21 personnel grouping, somewhat more traditional in terms of the fact that we have the fullback in the backfield now and the tailback set to the other side of the quarterback. For me, in the system that I know and I use, we call this alignment jokers, meaning you have, I can't spell, meaning you have one back to the right and one back to the left of the quarterback. If you had one just to the right, we would call that king. If you had one just to the left, you would call that queen. And then if you have 2 back there, we call it jokers. Anyway, the tight end, Mark Andrews, is up here. So you see where I'm getting the 21 personnel grouping from, even though there's no tight end aligned outside of the right tackle or the left tackle. This is one of the few times this year that we've hit the backside drag to the X. In this case, Sammy Watkins runs it into the vacated space when these 2 inside linebackers step up or blitz with the mesh between the quarterback and Devonta Freeman. We haven't hit that concept enough. I think in recent weeks we've seen it be open 3 or 4 times. All right, another 21 personnel grouping, and this is one of my favorite plays this year. Shows you the versatility of Ricard. He is now lined up here as a tight end. Still calling this a 21 personnel grouping because as a defensive coordinator or a defensive staff, you've got to decide, are you putting your base defense on the field when Ricard's on the field? What are you putting? Are you putting a heavy defensive group on the field? Anyway, here's the tight end, Mark Andrews. And here we've got Duvernay and Watkins as the 2 receivers. So 2 running backs, Ricard and Williams, tight end Andrews, and 2 receivers. A non-traditional alignment and definitely a non-traditional play. This is what we on this channel and all the people who comment have referred to as a PRO, pass run option. Devastating play that I think we used a version of against the Steelers mid-second quarter, I believe. Been hoping and waiting for the Ravens to use this a little bit more later on in the year as well. After Lamar keeps the ball and he reads that neither of the two receivers over here, Andrews or Watkins, is open, he's going to follow this cavalcade of blockers off the right side for a really easy gain. I would love to see us do a little bit more of this with Lamar so that he can gain yards without having to juke a defensive lineman and an inside linebacker. A more traditional 21 personnel formation, I say that it's more traditional. The fullback, Ricard, is lined up as tight end, and the tight end, Tomlinson, is lined up as the fullback. So it's a 21 personnel grouping, but which is traditional, but somewhat unique or unusual formation. And we have Ricard off the line, which technically makes him a slot, but we're calling him the tight end in this alignment. This is a stretch play to Freeman that he cuts all the way back across the field last week against the Steelers for a nice gain. 21 personnel. We are a little bit more predictable when we have a fullback in the backfield. And again, Tomlinson is a tight end, but lined up next to the quarterback, we call him a fullback. We're a little bit more predictable in terms of run pass when we put a fullback in the backfield, and we're super predictable in terms of run pass if we were to put two fullbacks in the backfield in our diamond formation. There will be elements of the formations that I don't cover, to be honest with you. So if you have questions or things that you notice that I don't point out, obviously mention them in the comments. Another 21 personnel grouping. There's the tailback, Williams. There's the fullback, Ricard. Everybody knows that Ricard isn't going to stand here 3 yards behind the heels of the offensive lineman. Generally, when he's at this depth, he's going to go in motion and lead block or, slip out into the flats. 21 personnel group. Oh, I forgot. This is the tight end right here. 21 personnel grouping. We max protect it. So Ricard, when in motion, helps block the end. Williams helps block over here on this side to try to give Lamar as much time as possible. Easy completion to Mark Andrews on the over route, or the deep over route. I'm a big fan of the max protect stuff. Sometimes we are a little predictable in terms of when we do it as well. Last week against the Steelers, a slightly different variation. Looks the same. The tailback is in the pistol. The tight end is in the same place, I believe, as he was on the last play. Here he's lined up a little bit tighter, a little bit closer to the tackle than he is here. But now we've got Ricard over on the left. So we can presume that he's going to go in motion and either block off the edge like last time or slip out into the flats. So out of the 21 personnel grouping, which obviously includes Ricard in almost all variations, we have multiple formations that we can use to attack the defense. Some are more effective than others. Obviously, I wish I had the yards per play out of each formation. That was my coverage of the 21 personnel grouping. There's definitely, more to cover out of that. This is just a primer. So now we have 22 personnel. So Ricard, the fullback, is in a more traditional alignment with the tailback in a traditional tailback alignment, and now the quarterback, Lamar, is under center. We know that typically under center is a short yardage thing that we do, or we go play action pass out of it. From the end zone angle, you'll see it is a short yardage situation. I think we pick up the first down. Obviously, I don't think we should be in that particular formation and that particular alignment that often. And just to point out, since Ricard is the fullback in the backfield, now we have two actual tight ends on the field, meaning Ricard's not lined up here or here like he does occasionally. So the defense would obviously know this is coming even before we huddle because Ricard, Tomlinson, and Andrews are all on the field. So they'd have the opportunity to sub defensively for more heavy run-stopping unit if they want to. I call this 22 personnel, but there's a little bit. No, then never mind. I apologize. There are two tight ends on the field. Same two guys I mentioned. Actually, I think this is Oliver over here. think this is Oliver. Ricard's still on as the fullback. And obviously, when we're in 22 personnel, really high tendency towards the run. So we don't use it against every team because some teams we're going to be real effective out of 22. Some teams we aren't. The Chiefs and the Chargers, we tore them up in 22 personnel. The Bengals and the Browns, not so much. They put 9 or 10 guys in the box and basically overwhelmed us in terms of numbers. Another 22 personnel grouping this past week against the Steelers. A unique variation of it. Here you have what I think is Oliver as the tight end. Ricard is the fullback, but he's lined up as a wing. And then I think this is Bateman as the receiver, which over on the other side, I think makes this Tomlinson. So you can see two backs, Freeman and Ricard, and then 2 tight ends, Oliver and what I think is Tomlinson. This is the play where the Steelers defensive lineman knocks down what could have been a huge play for the Ravens on these seam routes by Oliver and Tomlinson. Lamar is reading the free safety and notices that the free safety is sitting on the hash, and he's got a lot of space in here for Oliver to settle, and Oliver's a big target. I think this is going to be a big play. This defensive lineman, number 57 for the Steelers, made a hell of a play. Not necessarily going to break down every play, but I did like that one, that we were targeting Oliver, a guy who we don't target that often. We have hit him for some big plays and tried to hit him for some big plays a couple of times early in the season, but not lately. Another short yardage, 22 personnel. I think this is Tomlinson, the tight end. Oliver, who looks like he's off the line. And then Ricard on as the traditional fullback with Murray as the tailback. And you can see the Chiefs have responded by putting the eight guys in the box to try to stop the run. One of the few times that we give the ball to Patrick Ricard on a short yardage situation. We probably need to give him the ball some more on a couple of run plays a game just to keep defenses honest and just with the expectation that we know we're not going to get a ton of yards out of it. All right, this is where a lot of Ravens fans are split or have vastly different opinions. A lot of people would like us to be in 11 personnel more often. I don't have anything to offer in terms of yards per play, to be honest with you, but I can tell you one thing I do know. We have given up a whole lot more sacks in 11 personnel than we have in 21 personnel, 12 personnel, which I'm not really going to cover a lot today, or 22 personnel. So we got one back on the field, which is Freeman. The tight end here, which is Andrews. In most 11 personnel groupings for us, Andrews is on the field and Ricard is not. That kind of changed in the Steelers game. 3 receivers, Brown, Duvernay, and Watkins, because Bateman was not healthy yet. I believe this is a QB counter read. And Lamar keeps it and almost scores. We definitely have opportunities to run the ball out of 11 personnel. The difficulty for the Ravens is going to be Ricard is not on the field, and we do have a tendency to run behind him. So our run schemes are going to be different types of plays. Personally, to win football games this year, we probably need to run the ball more with this guy. And I know that's not what Ravens fans want to see or want to hear. But in order to win football games against good teams, we probably have to run plays like this 2 to 3 times per game. Another traditional 11 personnel grouping. This will be trips, 1, 2, 3 receivers. B-gun, where the back is away from the trips or away from the tight end. Here's your tight end, Mark Andrews, and here is your tailback. So you can see it's 11 personnel. This is a traditional 11 personnel grouping. The dropped pass by Mark Andrews where Devin Bush from behind kind of held him. Even though this is an empty formation, this is an 11 personnel grouping. Here's Freeman, the running back, the first number, and there is Andrews, the second number, the tight end. So you can see it is 11 personnel. This is the jump pass to Marquise Brown for a touchdown. Again, I tried to put somewhat entertaining plays in here. If you're already a football coach or a person who's real familiar with personnel and formations, you probably don't necessarily need to watch this whole video. and that's fine by me. I was just trying to show as many personnel groupings and formations as I could while I continue my data analysis of all the plays I've examined. All right, a slightly different 11 personnel grouping. The running back is now what they've done, just so you know, in this last formation, the backside guy, I think, is Watkins. And he is normally the X, him or Bateman. To the front side, we put the running backs on the same side as the bunch. So we basically have 4 eligible receivers to this side and 1 eligible receiver to this side out of our empty set. Fast forward back to where we were. Same situation, a bunch alignment. The difference is the tailback is here. And the X is up here off the line. And now the tight end, Mark Andrews, is backside as the X. Normally when he's lined up tight, he's going to chip and then delay release. I think that's what happens on this play. Just showing you multiple versions of our 11 personnel formations. Andrews does release late, and we hit Latavius Murray for a huge gain. He had 2 catches for 34 yards against the Steelers. Definitely was underutilized more as the game went on in terms of throwing to the running backs. All right, a more traditional 11 personnel set, trips left B, which is a mirror image of the first one I showed you out of 11 personnel. The back is here on our right. There's the tight end as part of a trip set. 1, 2, 3. So trips left, and then B is the back away from the tight end or away from the trips. Like I said before, there are opportunities to run the football out of 11 personnel, even with Ricard off the field. If we're going to go more 11 personnel, which is what we used on the last drive of the Steelers game, then we're going to have to run the football with our quarterback in order to fill that gap or that missing person in terms of Ricard not being on the field. Not that Ricard runs the ball a lot, because he certainly does not. But we're going to have to use our quarterback to run some more if we don't have a lead blocking fullback. All right, I have this listed as 11/20 personnel, basically because it all depends on how you classify Ricard. So you have a tailback, Freeman. You have 3 wide receivers. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's the number that you don't state or you don't say. And then now how do you classify Ricard? So if it's 11 personnel, then he is a tight end, where you have 1 tailback and 1 tight end because you're calling Ricard the tight end. If you want to call this 20 personnel, then what you're saying is Freeman is the tailback and Ricard is the fullback. And when I say, depending on how you want to treat it, I'm talking about the defense. You can see what the Steelers determined. They're in their base personnel. So they're in their base defense. 3 interior D linemen, 2 stand-up outside linebackers, and then 2 inside linebackers. So they were in their base 3-4 when we had Ricard on the field, no matter who else he was on the field with. This is the huge gain on the first possession that, and you'll see from behind, it's a nice job by Lamar to hand it off. It's basically F counter. The guard is pulling and kicking out. Ricard is pulling and wrapping up to the second level. Freeman kind of gives just a slight counter step, like he's going to go block for the sweep to Duvernay. And then Freeman cuts back and follows Ricard and the kick-out block by Powers for a huge gain. Unfortunately for us, we have an offensive staff that doesn't understand when they should try to punish someone. So on the very next play, we attempted a pass play, and Lamar got sacked, turning a 1st and 10 into a 2nd and 19, setting the stage for the awful interception by Lamar to end the first possession. I don't know about you, but after an 18-yard gain, let's line right back up and do it again. Same personnel grouping, a backwards bunch alignment, really. And then 1 tailback on the field. So, again, same thing. Would you rather call this 11 personnel? It all depends on how you classify Ricard. If you classify him as a tight end, it's 11. If you classify him as a fullback, then it's 20. 20 is an unusual personnel grouping that you don't see a lot of. Conversely, 11 personnel is taking over the football world. From youth football to high school, college, on up. 11 personnel is predominant now, whereas 21 personnel used to be the personnel grouping you would see the most. The Ravens 3 years ago, I guess, were in 13 personnel a lot. Last year, a lot of 21 personnel. This year we've kind of morphed into more 11 personnel than anything. Last couple of plays here. This one is going to, first of all, it's going to be a penalty on Tomlinson. I can't believe we get a penalty on a huge gain. Duvernay runs the sweep out here, and it's a huge gain, but Tomlinson is off the line, and Late recognizes he has to move up on the line. Unfortunately, when he moves on the line, Duvernay's already in motion, so we get a penalty for that. Even if he didn't move, we were going to get a penalty because we only had 6 men on the line of scrimmage. The difference with this with this formation is that Ricard is the tailback now. You can see it's not Ricard at fullback along with Latavius Murray or Freeman or Tyson Williams or anybody else. He is the tailback in this alignment. And we did that specifically so he could go lead block for Duvernay on the sweep. I don't know about you, but I'd like to see this play with Duvernay run at least 2 or 3 times a game. I know we're getting to the point where if you add up all the plays that myself and others would like to see run every game, we're getting to a pretty high number. Same personnel grouping. Ricard is the tailback, even though he's lined up in a bunch set. The reason why I say that is because this is Duvernay, that is Watkins, and that is Brown. So that's your 3 receivers. Here's our tight end, and here is our tailback / fullback, Ricard. So that's why, again, I'm calling this our, quote, new 11 personnel, which we have used in other games some, but we went too early in the Steelers game to kind of catch them off guard. Same motion by Duvernay. I didn't like the motion. I thought it was too slow. And yeah, the ball should be out of there probably, but Lamar gets a huge gain. Not being critical of Lamar because we've done that enough, but this drag is open a lot, and then this motion by Duvernay. Anytime you get a guy in motion all the way across, there's different routes that he'll run. A wheel, and a sit. In this case, he runs out into the flats, and we get this drag by Watkins, which is open as usual. Some of these things we got to start to hit, especially when they leave Duvernay totally unguarded. But I don't think he was part of the progression, and you guys know from listening to my other videos, I'm big on talking about progressions. No one is guarding Duvernay at all. This guy is trying to guard Watkins late. Devin Bush is running underneath here. No one appears to be covering this guy. This is an absolute mess by the Steelers in terms of coverage. I thought Watkins and Duvernay were both open. Let me know what you guys think of this as a primer for talking about personnel and formations. I feel like it was a little haphazard and ragged because I don't have data yet to show for each personnel grouping and formation, but that's where I would like this to go. If you needed an explanation of personnel and formations, hopefully I provided it well, and if I did not, ask a question in the comments section. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the video if you enjoy the content.